Okay, so even with the notes I took, I'm still not entirely sure where to start, so I will just start. Going off the theme of constants and variables, the most important constant in this scenario is Booker's baptism. As Elizabeth said, in some universes, Booker took the baptism, and in other universes, he walked away. Now that is where the story branches. In the universes where he walks away, he retains his identity as Booker DeWitt. In the universes where he takes the baptism, he is reborn as Comstock. Now on the Booker side of the timeline, he goes so in both realities, Booker goes to be baptized after Wounded Knee. In the realities where he rejects it, in the reality where he in the reality where he rejects the baptism, he goes on to join the Pinkertons, which are basically Union Busters, and then later in his life, he gives birth to Anna DeWitt. Now, later in life, he accrued his gambling debt to Robert Lutece, and ended up selling Anna to Robert and Rosalind and Comstock. Booker, as we saw, Booker tries to steal Anna back, which causes her pinky to be severed. Now that moment right there where Anna's pinky is cut off is the moment where she gets her powers, because not only is she stolen from Booker's reality into Comstock's, but a piece of her is left behind in Booker's reality. And the way Rosalind puts it in one of the voxophones is that the universe doesn't like having its peas mixed with its porridge. So Anna, or Elizabeth, gaining her powers was the universe's way of reconciling this one entity existing in two different realities at the exact same time. Unlike Booker and Comstock, who, I guess you could say, they diverged after the baptism. Some Bookers stayed Booker and others stayed Comstock, but in all the realities, Anna and Elizabeth stay the same person. What's next? So Booker, after selling Anna, Booker spends 20 years in shame, as we saw in his ruined office. And that part where Robert opens the tear to the Columbia Lighthouse actually did happen. That wasn't like a visual, how do I say it? It was an actual event that took place. It wasn't just Elizabeth playing with the tears. After Booker was pulled from his reality into Comstock's by the Luteces, his brain manufactures the memories of being called to Columbia to retrieve the girl and bring her to New York to wipe away the debt, which is... Ryan, what are you saying? Fuck, where was I? So his brain makes up the memories of being called to Columbia to retrieve Elizabeth in order to wipe away his quote-unquote debt, which he believes at the time is his gambling debt, and when in reality it's the guilt that he's carried for these past 20 years. And that's why the Luteces have that moment of, well, the mind adapts, and then Robert says, I would know, I lived it, because Robert actually did live through a similar phenomenon. In Booker's reality, okay, so in both realities there are Luteces. In Booker's reality it's Robert Lutece. In Comstock's reality it's Rosalind Lutece. They're both quantum physicists, but Rosalind is the one who builds the Lutece device in order to find... She's the one who built the device and was thus the one who figured out how to open tears. After communicating with Robert through some weird interdimensional thing involving a quantum particle, they finally found a way to open a tear between Comstock and Booker's reality, at which point Rosalind brought Robert through to Comstock's reality, in which point he underwent that same sort of mental trauma that Booker did after coming to Columbia. He started acting irrationally, he started bleeding from the nose, and it was only through blood transfusions from Rosalind and just playing music to keep him calm that Robert was able to pull through and eventually coexist in Comstock's reality with Rosalind. And after he managed to do that, the Luteces were finally introduced to the people of Columbia as a set of twins instead of just two people from different realities. So that's Booker's story. Jumping over to Comstock's, after Wounded Knee, he accepts the baptism and works with Rosalind Lutece, works with both Luteces in order to found Columbia. Comstock doesn't have children, and as was said in the game, he was sterilized after repeated exposure to the device that the Luteces built. In order to make up for that, Comstock went to Booker's reality in order to steal Anna away, so that the prophecy of the seed of the prophet drowning in flames the mountains of man, so that prophecy can come true. What's next? So Anna is pulled from Booker's reality into Comstock's. Lady Comstock discovers Anna and Lady Comstock discovers Anna and is angered because she thinks that Elizabeth is the child of Comstock and Rosalind Lutece instead of her child born in wedlock. In order to cover up where Anna / Elizabeth actually came from, Comstock has Lady Comstock murdered and pins the murder on Daisy Fitzroy. Who keeps buzzing me? Later, Comstock comes to view the Lutece twins as threats, so he hires Jeremiah Fink, the guy with the top hat and the curly mustache, to sabotage the Lutece device in order to try and kill both the twins off. What actually happened was that it basically caused them to exist throughout all of time and throughout all of space, which is how they're able to blip in and out of Columbia at will in order to keep pushing Booker and Elizabeth forward. How do I get into this next point? So our trip through Columbia is not the first Booker that goes through. Our Booker is not the first one that goes through Columbia. 121 other Bookers went to Columbia at the Luteces' behests in order to kill Comstock and avenge the Luteces' so-called murder. If you remember back earlier in their game when the Luteces had that coin flip thing and Robert had the board with the heads and tails count on it, there were 121 counts for heads and ours was the 122nd. All those other counts were times where Booker came to Columbia to try to bring us the girl and wipe away the debt, only to be foiled by Songbird. The only thing that made this Booker different is that... Motherfucker. Yeah, see, even with all these notes, I still have very little idea what I'm talking about. So our Booker finally succeeds because... So after our Elizabeth is kidnapped by Songbird and taken back and supposedly taken back to her tower, Booker is pulled into another reality by Elizabeth, And that's where we go through that mental hospital and find the old Elizabeth at the end. That piece of paper she gives us before throwing us back into our own reality is what changes everything, because it gives us the means to control Songbird, and with Songbird under our control, we are able to destroy the siphon on Monument Island in order to give Elizabeth full control over her powers again. What was I gonna say next? Fuck. So Elizabeth regains control of her power. She takes us to the Sea of Lighthouses. And she shows Booker his baptism twice. The first time is when he walked away from the baptism and stayed as Booker. And then the second time at the very end was she was right. It wasn't the same place. It was a reality where Booker takes the baptism in order to become Comstock. And that's why all the other Elizabeths showed up at that moment, because those were Elizabeths from the realities where Booker became Comstock and then failed no. Those were the Elizabeths from the realities where Booker becomes Comstock, and then the Booker who comes to Columbia to retrieve Elizabeth all died because of Songbird. So they all gang together to smother Booker in this Comstock reality. So now that Comstock was never born in those realities, all those other Elizabeths disappeared because their realities were severed, erased, undone, whatever you want to call them. Hi, Rhea. I'm talking out my ass and trying to make sense of the shit that comes out. What else was there? I mean, yeah, I think I said pretty much all there is to say. 27 minutes in. I'm gonna go pee before we start Burial at Sea.